Seoul charity gala like a gunshot. For 3 heartbeats, the world stopped. Crystal chandeliers hung motionless above a frozen ballroom. Champagne glasses paused halfway to painted lips. Conversations died mid-word. Even the orchestra seemed to hold its breath. Tae-suk's hand hung in the air, fingers still curved from the impact. His face wore confusion, as if surprised by his own action. Beneath his expensive cufflinks, his wrist trembled. Zarya's head had snapped to the side. A red handprint bloomed across her dark cheek like a violent flower. But when she turned back, her eyes held no tears. No shock. Just a coldness that made the temperature drop 10 degrees. The ballroom held 200 of Seoul's elite. Not one person moved. Zarya's hand shot out with surgical precision. She caught Tae-suk's wrist mid-air, twisted with the efficiency of someone who'd survived worse than ballroom humiliation. The technique was flawless, learned in underground rings where mistakes meant broken bones or death. His arm bent at an unnatural angle. He gasped, then dropped to his knees on the polished marble, his designer suit crumpling like paper. She released him without a word. He collapsed completely, cradling his arm. Still, the ballroom remained frozen. Across the vast space, through the forest of designer gowns and tailored suits, Kang Jae-hoon stood perfectly still. His whiskey glass caught the chandelier light. Inside, a single ice cube melted slowly, the only movement in the entire room. His face revealed nothing. No anger. No surprise. Not even disappointment. But the security guards flanking the exits took an involuntary step backward. They'd worked for him long enough to recognize something far more dangerous than rage. Absolute control. Hyunchul and Minwoo stood beside their fallen friend, their faces pale beneath expensive haircuts. They'd been laughing 30 seconds ago. Mocking. Testing boundaries they'd convinced themselves existed. Now they understood their mistake. Zarya smoothed her burgundy gown with hands that didn't shake. She didn't look at her husband. Didn't need to. After 3 years of marriage, they communicated in silences that spoke louder than words. The ice cube in Jae-hoon's glass finally dissolved completely. He set the glass down on a passing tray with deliberate care. The soft click of crystal on silver was the only sound in the cavernous space. Then he began walking toward his wife. Not hurrying. Each step measured, purposeful. The crowd parted like water before a shark. What none of them knew, not Tae-suk nursing his twisted arm, not Hyunchul and Minwoo exchanging nervous glances, not the 200 witnesses holding their breath, was that this slap would cost them everything. Their empires. Their freedom. Their lives as they knew them. Because they'd just made a fatal error. They'd mistaken his wife for his weakness. She was actually his greatest strength. 6 years earlier, Busan. The abandoned warehouse smelled of rust and desperation. 4 young men sat in a circle, sharing a single bowl of ramyeon, passing it between them with the careful equality of people who understood hunger intimately. Kang Jae-hoon was 28, all sharp angles and sharper instincts. Beside him sat Yoon Tae-suk, whose smile could charm money from stones, a skill that had saved them more than once. Lee Hyunchul sat across from them, already wearing the cheap glasses that made him look intellectual, his mind constantly calculating 3 moves ahead. And Go Minwoo, the enforcer, whose fists spoke the language of Busan's brutal streets. Brothers until death, Tae-suk said, raising the nearly empty bowl like a champagne flute. Until death, they echoed. That night, Tae-suk had talked them out of a confrontation with the Serpent Gang using nothing but words and nerve. The week before, Hyunchul's plan had netted them enough money to eat for a month. And Minwoo still carried the knife wound he'd taken meant for Jae-hoon, a puckered scar on his ribs he wore like a medal. They carved their palms with the same blade that had wounded Minwoo. Blood dripped onto concrete as they pressed their hands together, mixing their essence into something they believed unbreakable. Brotherhood forged in blood and poverty. They were wrong about the unbreakable part. 2 years ago, Seoul underground. Jae-hoon had built an empire from that Busan warehouse. His three brothers rose with him, each finding their place in the organization that now controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. He'd come to the illegal fight ring on business. He left with something far more valuable. Zarya Okoye moved like water and struck like lightning. 3 men surrounded her in the cage, an ambush meant to punish her for winning too many fights, for taking money from the wrong pockets. They expected an easy target. They learned otherwise quickly. She dropped the first with an elbow strike that shattered his nose. The second caught a knee to the solar plexus that left him gasping. The third managed to grab her hair before she spun, used his own momentum against him, and sent him face first into the cage wall. 90 seconds that now controlled half of Seoul's underground economy. He'd come to the illegal fight ring on business. He left with something far more valuable. Zarya Okoye moved like water and struck like lightning. 3 men surrounded her in the cage, an ambush meant to punish her for winning too many fights, for taking money from the wrong pockets. They expected an easy target. They learned otherwise quickly. She dropped the first with an elbow strike that shattered his nose. The second caught a knee to the solar plexus that left him gasping. The third managed to grab her hair before she spun, used his own momentum against him, and sent him face first into the cage wall. 90 seconds. 3 unconscious men. Not a hair out of place in her tight braids. Jae-hoon watched from the shadows as she collected her money without celebration, without even breathing hard. When their eyes met across the blood-stained mat, something shifted in his chest like tectonic plates realigning. "You fight well," he said when he found her later. "I fight to survive," she corrected in perfect Korean, though her accent carried traces of another world. Over 6 months, they built something neither had expected to find. She'd survived human trafficking, arriving in Korea at 16 with nothing but the clothes she wore and an iron determination to never be helpless again. The illegal fighting rings had been her education, teaching her languages by necessity and combat by survival. "I speak 5 languages," she told him one night, tracing the scars on his back with gentle fingers. "English, Korean, Igbo, Yoruba, and Mandarin. You learn fast when your life depends on understanding threats in any tongue." "What language does your heart speak?" he asked. She smiled, a rare expression that transformed her face. "Yours, apparently." Their wedding was small. Intimate. His 3 brothers stood as groomsmen, smiling for the cameras. But Jae-hoon, who'd spent years reading people's true intentions beneath their masks, caught something in their eyes when they looked at his bride. Not happiness for their brother's joy. Envy. Resentment. Calculation. Tae-suk's smile didn't reach his eyes. Hyun-chul's congratulations felt rehearsed. Min-woo drank too much and made comments about exotic tastes that weren't quite jokes. Zarya noticed too. She always noticed. "They don't like me," she whispered that night. "They don't matter," he replied, pulling her close. But they both knew that was a lie. In their world, everyone mattered. Every alliance. Every threat. Every seed of betrayal, just waiting for the right moment to bloom into something poisonous. Security guards materialized from the shadows, their hands gentle but firm as they escorted Tae-suk toward the exit. He was laughing, a high, nervous sound that echoed wrong in the silent ballroom. Like a man trying to convince himself the tiger hadn't really bared its teeth. "Just a misunderstanding," he called over his shoulder, his voice too loud. "Too much champagne, you know how it is." Hyun-chul and Min-woo flanked him, their hands on his elbows, supporting him as if he were merely drunk rather than terrified. But their heads were close together, whispering urgently. Planning. Always planning. Jae-hoon took Zarya's hand without a word. His touch was gentle where it wrapped around her fingers, but she could feel the tremor of rage running through him like an electrical current. They walked out of the gala together, leaving 200 witnesses to fill the silence with speculation. The car ride home stretched in wordless tension. In their bedroom, Zarya finally spoke. It wasn't the alcohol. She touched her cheek where the redness was already fading. "I saw it in their eyes before he struck. This was calculated. A test. A test of what? Jae-hoon's voice was dangerously quiet. Of you. Of us. They wanted to see if I've made you weak. She met his eyes in the mirror. They wanted to see what you'd do. He turned away, jaw tight. They're idiots, but they're my brothers. They'd never. Wouldn't they? She caught his arm. Jae-hoon, I've survived by reading people. Those men don't see me as your wife. They see me as the thing that changed you. And they resent it. You're wrong. But his voice carried no conviction. 2 weeks later, she learned she was right. The door exploded inward at 4 a.m. Zarya jolted awake to flashlight beams cutting through darkness and shouted commands in Korean. Her hand instinctively reached for Jae-hoon, but he was already being dragged from their bed by 3 officers in tactical gear. Kang Jae-hoon, you're under arrest for the murder of Judge Park Sung-min. The words hit like physical blows. Judge Park, the reformer, the incorruptible voice against organized crime. Found dead 3 days ago in his home office. That's impossible, Zarya said, finding her voice. He was here that night, with me. We have evidence, ma'am. Please step aside. They produced an evidence bag containing a knife. Custom-made, distinctive handle. She recognized it immediately, from Jae-hoon's collection in his study. The one that had been missing for 2 weeks. Fingerprints match, the lead detective said, almost apologetically. CCTV footage places him at the scene. We have a witness. Jae-hoon's eyes found hers across the chaos of their ransacked bedroom. In that moment, she saw understanding dawn in his expression, the same realization crystallizing in her own mind. This wasn't police work. This was a frame. Precise, calculated, and executed by people who knew exactly where to find the perfect weapon, how to plant the perfect evidence. People who'd been in their home countless times. Brothers. Trust no one, Jae-hoon said as they cuffed his hands behind his back. Not a warning. A command. An acknowledgement that the world they'd known had just shattered. She watched them take him, helpless for the first time since she was 16 years old. The feeling was acid in her throat. The morning news played on repeat while she sat frozen in their living room. Crime boss arrested for judge's murder, investigation ongoing, territories now under temporary management by associate Yoon Tae-suk. Tae-suk. Already positioned. Already taking control. Her hands shook as she reached for her phone. Not with fear. With rage so pure it felt like clarity. They'd tested her husband at the gala. Found him unwilling to retaliate against his brothers. Mistook his restraint for weakness. Now they were destroying him, piece by piece. Taking his freedom. His reputation. His empire. But they'd made one critical miscalculation. They'd forgotten about her. Zarya stood, her reflection in the darkened television screen showing a woman transformed. No more the quiet wife at her husband's side. The fighter who'd survived trafficking and underground rings was emerging from where she'd buried her. If they wanted to see what she was capable of, she'd show them. Every single things. Week 1. The prison transport van delivered Jae-hoon to Cheongsong, a facility notorious for being controlled by the very gangs he'd spent years competing against. Not an accident. Another piece of the frame. His first meal arrived on a plastic tray. Rice, soup, kimchi. Institutional and unremarkable. But Jae-hoon hadn't survived Busan's streets by trusting the obvious. He studied the food, noting the slight discoloration in the soup, the faint chemical smell beneath the fermented vegetables. The rat was easy to find, prisons always had them. He fed the soup through the bars of his cell. 3 minutes later, the animal convulsed and died. Word spread fast. The first assassination attempt had failed. Week 3. The shower attack came at dawn. 5 men, shanks fashioned from metal and broken concrete. They thought the water's noise would cover the violence. They were wrong about many things. Jae-hoon moved like water himself, using the confined space to his advantage. He broke the first attacker's arm against the tile wall. Dislocated the second's shoulder with a strike that echoed off concrete. The third he dropped with precision to the solar plexus that left the man unable to breathe. The remaining 2 ran. After that, other inmates watched him differently. Respect born from survival. Soon, an older prisoner approached him during yard time. Im Sang-woo, the man introduced himself quietly. Former National Intelligence Service. Framed for crimes I didn't commit. His eyes were sharp behind weathered features. You're building something. I can help. Thus, the Forgotten Ones was born, a network of wrongly imprisoned men who'd learned to trade in the only currency that mattered behind bars, information. Guard Choi Dae-young was their first outside ally. His brother had been killed by the same corruption that had imprisoned Sang-woo. He brought them news, moved messages, kept them alive when other guards looked away. Outside, week 2. Zarya's heels clicked against marble as she entered attorney Kim Min-seo's office. The lawyer's expression told her everything before she spoke. The evidence is airtight, Kim said, spreading documents across her desk. Fingerprints, footage, witness testimony. Unless we can prove fabrication. Then we prove it. Zarya leaned forward. Show me everything. She studied the CCTV footage frame by frame, her mind working like the fighter she'd been. There, a glitch in the timestamp. Barely noticeable unless you were looking. The footage had been edited. She needed help. The kind that operated outside legal boundaries. Han Ji-woo, Ghost, in the hacking community, was 19 and brilliant. 2 years ago, Jae-hoon had cleared his gambling debt and saved him from breaking. The debt of honor was real. I need you to find something that doesn't want to be found, Zarya told him. Ghost's fingers flew across keyboards, diving into digital shadows. 3 days later, he surfaced with gold. The witness, Park Il-sung, had received $200,000 from a shell company. Ghost traced it through 6 layers of protection back to offshore accounts bearing Hyunchol's digital fingerprints. Week 5. 3 men arrived at her door at midnight. Tae-suk's message was clear: leave Seoul or be removed. Zarya let them in. 7 minutes later, all 3 were unconscious on her floor. Krav Maga for the first, brutal efficiency learned in rings where mercy meant death. Muay Thai for the second, elbows and knees in combinations that left no room for defense. The third she simply disarmed and disabled with techniques that proved she'd never stopped being dangerous. She photographed them, sent the image to Tae-suk with 5 words: tell him I'm not leaving. Week 7. The prison visitation room was all harsh light and plexiglass. Zarya pressed her palm against the barrier. Jae-hoon matched it from the other side, their wedding rings aligned through the glass. The flowers are blooming early this year, she said carefully. Their code. She'd found evidence. The investigation was bearing fruit. Be careful with thorns, he replied. Watch for danger. I'll prove you're innocent, she said in English, abandoning code for raw truth. His lips moved silently. I know you will. Week 8. Ghost's deepest dive uncovered the nightmare beneath the frame. Email chains deleted but not destroyed. Plans laid 6 months before the gala. And buried in coded language, the truth. Min-woo had killed Judge Pak personally. Orders from Hyun-chul. Approval from Tae-suk. The judge had been investigating their cartel connections. His murder served 2 purposes: eliminate a threat and frame Jae-hoon for it. They'd stolen his fingerprints. Forged the footage. Bought the witness. Orchestrated everything. All 3 brothers. United in betrayal. Zarya sat in her makeshift investigation room, surrounded by evidence of their treachery, and felt something cold settle in her chest. Not despair. Not even anger anymore. Purpose. Clear and sharp as the blade they'd used to frame her husband. They wanted to destroy him. She'd burn their entire world down first. Week 9. Ghost's eyes were bloodshot from 72 hours of continuous hacking when he finally broke through. "I'm in," he whispered, though they were alone in Zarya's makeshift war room. The private server materialized on his screen like a confession written in digital ink. Emails. Hundreds of them. Deleted but never truly gone, nothing ever was in the digital world. Zarya leaned over his shoulder, reading words that transformed everything she'd suspected into documented fact. From hchyential.secure@shell-corp.net. To tsm.w. Date, 6 months before the gala. Subject, the endgame. Asterisk, the wife is the weakness we've been waiting for. She's made him soft, hesitant. We test him publicly first. If he doesn't retaliate, we know we can proceed with permanent removal. Asterisk. Her breath caught. The slap wasn't a drunken impulse. It was a strategic provocation. She scrolled further, each email a knife twist. From T.S. Subject, cleaner approach. Asterisk, killing him creates a power vacuum and potential martyrdom. Better to destroy him completely, reputation, freedom, legacy. Frame him for something unforgivable. Judge Pak is getting too close to our cartel operations anyway. 2 problems, 1 solution. Asterisk. From M.W. Subject, acquisition complete. Asterisk, dinner executed as planned. Target heavily sedated, won't remember anything. Fingerprints lifted using polymer tape. Knife acquired from study. He suspects nothing. Asterisk. Zarya's hands gripped the desk's edge. What dinner? Ghost pulled up calendar cross-references. Business dinner. 2 weeks before Judge Pak's murder. Catered by, he clicked through shell companies, following the money trail like breadcrumbs. A company owned by Hyunchol's cousin. They'd drugged her husband in his own home. Stolen his fingerprints while he was unconscious. Took the murder weapon from his collection while he smiled and drank wine, believing he was among brothers. The original plan had been assassination. But framing him was cleaner, their word. Clinical. As if destroying a man's entire existence was simply better business. Week 10. Park Il-sung's luxury apartment overlooked the Han River, a view purchased with blood money and lies. Zarya entered through the unlocked balcony door, moving with the silence she'd learned in rings where noise meant discovery and discovery meant death. He was watching television when she sat down beside him. To his credit, he only flinched once. "You know who I am," she said. Not a question. He nodded, face pale. She didn't threaten. "I didn't need to." Instead, she placed photographs on his coffee table. His daughter. 8 years old. Leaving school. Playing in the park. Living her innocent life. "They paid you $200,000, Zarya said quietly. Coach you on testimony. Threatened your daughter to ensure your cooperation." She met his eyes. "But witnesses who've served their purpose become liabilities. They'll kill you when you're no longer useful. I can protect you. Choose." The silence stretched for 30 seconds. Then Park Il-sung began to cry. "They said it was just lying to the police," he whispered. "Just saying I saw him leave the building. I didn't know. I didn't understand what it meant. Tell me everything." He did. $200,000 wired through untraceable accounts. Scripts for his testimony, rehearsed until perfect. Photos of his daughter with crosshairs drawn over her face, a promise and a threat. The recorder in Zarya's pocket captured every word. Week 11, inside. Jae-hoon noticed guard Captain Han watching him differently. The man's eyes held a hunter's patience, waiting for the perfect moment. Im Sang-woo confirmed it during yard time, speaking without moving his lips. Captains on their payroll. Riot being planned. You're the target. Make it look like gang violence. When? Soon. My NIS contacts say your friends are getting nervous. They want you dead before your wife finds too much. That night, Sang-woo revealed more. The National Intelligence Service had been building a case against the three friends for months: money laundering, cartel connections, corruption network spreading through Seoul's elite like cancer. Judge Pak was their investigator, Sang-woo explained. He discovered your friends were facilitating Chinese drug cartel operations through legitimate businesses. That's why they killed him. You were just a convenient scapegoat. The pieces assembled into a picture far larger than personal betrayal. His imprisonment was a single move in a game involving corrupt officials, international crime, and networks of power that reached into the government itself. Week 12. The visitation came through unusual channels. Attorney Kim delivered documents for Jae-hoon to review. Legal paperwork requiring signatures. Except buried between pages of contracts was everything Zarya had found. Their hands met during the exchange. His fingers brushed hers for less than a second, but in that touch lived everything they couldn't say. Her warmth. His strength. A connection that prison walls couldn't sever. She mouthed through the glass, soon. He nodded once. Understanding passing between them is like electricity. They were running out of time. The riot was coming. The court date is approaching. Everything balanced on a knife's edge. But they weren't fighting alone anymore. And his brothers, former brothers, had no idea what was coming for them. Week 13, 6:47 a.m. The prison riot started in the cafeteria. A dropped tray. Shouted insults. Then 50 inmates surging toward Jae-hoon's wing with weapons fashioned from weeks of preparation. Not random. Coordinated. Purchased. Jae-hoon saw guard Captain Han unlock the security doors before disappearing. The betrayal was complete. Im Sang-woo materialized at his side. Secure wing. Now. They ran. The first wave hit them in the corridor. Jae-hoon caught a shank aimed at his throat, twisted the attacker's wrist until bones cracked, and used the man's momentum to throw him into two others. A broken pipe became his weapon, crude but effective. Sang-woo fought beside him, movements precise despite his age. Then a blade found him, sliding between ribs with terrible accuracy. He gasped, stumbled. Jae-hoon caught him, dragged him backward while fighting with one hand. A torn piece of metal became his next weapon. Then a fire extinguisher swung with enough force to crack skulls. The corridor was a nightmare of violence. 12 attackers between them and safety. Jae-hoon moved through them like death itself, not elegant, not clean, but brutally efficient. Every technique learned in Busan streets, refined through years of survival. Guard Choi appeared, weapon drawn, providing covering fire. A bullet caught his shoulder. He kept shooting. 37 minutes. That's how long Jae-hoon held that corridor. Blood soaking his prison uniform, none of it his. 7 attackers were hospitalized. The rest retreated when backup finally arrived. But the message was clear: next time, they'd send more. 7:23 a.m., across Seoul. Zarya was reviewing evidence when her apartment door shattered. Hyunchul's men moved with professional efficiency. They found Ghost in his makeshift tech station, fingers still flying across keyboards trying to upload backup files. They destroyed everything. Smashed servers with hammers. Burned hard drives. Stole equipment. And took Ghost, unconscious from a blow to the head, into a van that disappeared into morning traffic. The digital evidence, months of work, was gone. 9:15 a.m. Park Il-sung's body was discovered hanging in his apartment. Suicide, the police report would say. The confession recording had been on Ghost's primary server. Also destroyed. 11:30 a.m. Attorney Kim's office felt like a funeral. The court date's been moved up 4 days. The lawyer's hands trembled as she poured tea neither of them would drink. Without the witness, without digital evidence, we have nothing. I'm sorry, Zarya. There's no case. Zarya sat motionless, the words washing over her like water over stone. 2:47 p.m. Minwoo entered her apartment through the door she deliberately left unlocked. He wanted this confrontation. She'd give it to him. You're impressive, he said, settling into Jaehoon's chair like he belonged there. Most women would have run by now. But you've lost. He placed an envelope on the table. $5 million. Disappear. Start over somewhere he'll never find you. No. He smiled, pulled out his phone, and showed her photos. The prison riot. Jaehoon covered in blood, fighting through a corridor of bodies. Sangwoo bleeding. Guard Choi shot. Your husband barely survived today, Minwoo said softly. Next time, he won't. We can keep sending waves until one succeeds. Or, he tapped the envelope. You take the money. Vanish. We'll make his prison time comfortable. Everyone lives. Except for justice. Justice? He laughed. Justice is whatever the powerful decide it is. Your husband understood that once. Before you made him soft. He stood, moved toward the door. Think about it. You have until tomorrow. After he left, Zarya sat in the gathering darkness. The apartment felt haunted by everything they'd built together. Wedding photos. Shared meals. Quiet mornings. A life that 3 men had decided to erase. She looked at their wedding photo, her in white, him smiling without the weight of betrayal in his eyes. A single tear tracked down her cheek, the first she'd allowed herself since this began. Then she picked up her phone. Dialed an unlisted number she'd sworn never to use. A debt she'd promised to call and only if there was no other choice. A man answered in Japanese. Moshi Moshi. Zarya spoke one word. A title that carried weight across Asia's underworld. A name that opened doors and ended arguments. Oyabun. Silence. Then, the debt will be honored. We're coming. She ended the call and stood. The evidence was gone. The witness died. The case is impossible. But she just called in an army. If legal justice wouldn't save her husband, she'd bring a different kind. Week 14, dawn. The private jet touched down at Incheon International at sunrise. Zarya stood on the tarmac, watching figures emerge from the aircraft like spirits materializing from memory. Tanaka Hiroshi stepped out first, 60 years old, gray hair impeccable, traditional tattoos visible at his collar. Beside him walked his daughter, Keiko, the woman whose life Zarya had saved 8 years ago in an underground ring in Osaka. The Oyabun approached, bowed slightly. Zarya returned it. The debt is honored, he said in Japanese. What do you need? Everything. 5 years earlier, Osaka. The flashback hit Zarya as she watched the Tanaka family's team assemble. She'd been fighting in Japan's underground circuits, running from her past, when she witnessed 3 men dragging a young woman into an alley. Keiko Tanaka, drunk and separated from her security. The men had Yakuza tattoos. They should have been untouchable. Zarya had broken 2 of them permanently. Saved Keiko. Refused payment. My father will want to repay this, Keiko had said. Tell him I hope I never need to collect. Now she has. The reconstruction begins. The Tanaka family brought resources that made Ghost's operation look amateur. A digital forensics expert named Yamamoto rebuilt what had been destroyed, diving into backup servers the traitors never knew existed, cloud storage, mirror sites, redundant systems hidden in code. The deleted emails reappeared like ghosts returning to haunt their killers. A private investigator, former Tokyo Metropolitan Police, found what prosecutors had missed. Judge Pak had been thorough. Paranoid. He'd kept backup files of his investigation in a safety deposit box under his wife's maiden name. The box contained everything: financial records proving the three friends' cartel connections, witness statements, transaction histories. Proof that couldn't be destroyed because they'd never known it existed. The forensic team Tanaka brought examined the murder weapon with technology Seoul's police couldn't access. They found what they were looking for: the DNA evidence had been planted. Microscopic analysis revealed the blood had been applied post-manufacturing, and the cellular breakdown indicated laboratory storage. Ghost, rescued from the basement where Hyun-chul's men had held him, traced the DNA sample's chain of custody. It led to a medical laboratory owned through 17 shell companies back to Taesuk. They'd kept Jae-hoon's blood from a routine health screening. Planted it months later on a knife they'd stolen from his home. Every piece of their frame, documented and destroyed. Inside, week 14. Im Sang-woo's NIS contacts finally moved. Two agents in dark suits appeared in the prison yard, speaking in tones that carried authority beyond their physical presence. "We can get you out today," the senior agent said. "Testify against the corruption network. Immediate release, protection, new identity if needed." Jae-hoon studied them. "I won't accept freedom that looks like a deal. I want exoneration. That takes time. Then I'll wait." He leaned forward. "But I'll give you something better than my testimony. I'll give you everyone." Through the forgotten ones, he'd spent months mapping the corruption networks. Every prisoner had stories. Every guard had seen things. Information flowed through prisons like water, and Jae-hoon had built dams to collect it all. He named names: Guard Captain Han, Warden Cho, 3 prosecutors who'd buried evidence, the police captain who'd coordinated the arrest. Every official his former brothers had purchased. The agent's expressions shifted from skepticism to hunger. This wasn't testimony. This was a roadmap to dismantling Seoul's corruption infrastructure. "We'll need documentation." Already compiled. Sang-woo produced a file folder that shouldn't have existed in prison. Dates, payments, meetings. Everything. 2 days later, Attorney Kim filed for an emergency hearing. The new evidence was overwhelming. The judge had no choice. Kang Jae-hoon is hereby released pending full investigation. All charges suspended. Day 16, Prison Gates. Jae-hoon walked out into sunlight he'd thought he might never see again. Thinner. Harder. Gray streaking through his hair is more pronounced. But alive. Zarya stood at the gates wearing her wedding dress, the same white gown from 3 years ago. Not pristine anymore. She'd kept it through everything, a promise made of fabric and faith. He stopped 3 feet away, drinking in the sight of her. No plexiglass between them. No guards watching. Just them and the morning and freedom. He reached out, touched her left cheek with infinite gentleness. Where Taesuk had slapped her. Where this had all begun. She caught his hand, pressed it to her face, then brought it to her lips. Kissed knuckles scarred from prison fights and survival. "Ready to finish this?" Her voice is steady. "With you?" A smile touched his lips for the first time in months. "Always." The War Council. They gathered in a secure location, a penthouse owned by the Tanaka family. The army Zarya had assembled filled the room. Ghost, his face still bruised but eyes burning with vengeance. Tanaka Hiroshi and his people, bringing Yakuza precision to legal warfare. Im Sang-woo, released on medical grounds, his NIS contacts ready to move. Guard Choi, shoulder bandaged, armed with insider knowledge. And Jae-hoon's loyal people, the ones who'd never believed the charges, who'd waited for his return. Jae-hoon stood at the head of the table, Zarya beside him. "Partners. Equals. They tried to bury me," he said quietly. "They framed me. They tried to kill me. They threatened my wife. His eyes swept the room. Now we show them what happens when you mistake mercy for weakness. The plan was elegant in its brutality, legal destruction and street justice, perfectly coordinated. 3 days, Zarya said. We take everything. Week 17, Day 1, 9:00 a.m. The press conference erupted like a bomb in Seoul's morning calm. Prosecutors stood before microphones, faces grave, announcing arrest warrants for 3 of the city's most prominent businessmen. Yoon Tae-suk, Lee Hyun-chul, and Go Min-woo are charged with conspiracy to commit murder, obstruction of justice, money laundering, and facilitating drug trafficking operations. The evidence displayed behind them told the story: emails plotting murder, financial records tracing cartel money, Judge Park's hidden investigation files, forensic proof of the frame. The media descended like locusts. The 3 who tried to bury a king screamed the afternoon headlines. Their lawyers scrambled, but the case was airtight. Every loophole closed. Every escape route was blocked. Day 1-3, Financial Apocalypse. Ghost worked from the Tanaka penthouse, fingers dancing across keyboards with surgical precision. Beside him, Yamamoto coordinated with Tokyo, freezing accounts across 3 countries simultaneously. Shell companies collapsed like dominoes. Offshore accounts locked. Legitimate businesses revealed as cartel fronts. Partners fled. Investors panicked. Stock prices nosedived. Tae-suk's real estate empire, built on laundered drug money, seized by authorities. Hyun-chul's tech companies are exposed as cryptocurrency laundering operations. Min-woo's security firms were revealed as enforcement arms for the cartel. By day 3, their combined net worth had evaporated. Billions became millions, became nothing. Properties auctioned. Assets frozen. Empires reduced to bankruptcy filings. They'd built everything on corruption. When the foundation crumbled, nothing remained. Day 4, 11:47 p.m., Incheon warehouse. The warehouse where they'd sworn their blood oaths stood empty and haunted. Jae-hoon sat in a metal chair in the center, Zarya standing at his right hand. Around them, shadows moved, loyal soldiers, Tanaka family representatives, 30 people who'd waited for this moment. The 3 former friends arrived in a luxury car, believing they were meeting intermediaries to negotiate. Maybe buy their way out. Money always worked before. The car doors opened. They stepped into the warehouse. And saw him. Tae-suk stopped walking, face draining of color. Hyun-chul's confident stride faltered. Min-woo's hand instinctively moved toward a weapon that wasn't there. Security had confiscated everything at the perimeter. Brother, Tae-suk started. Don't. Jae-hoon's voice cut like a blade. Brothers don't frame each other for murder. Brothers don't try to kill each other in prison riots. Don't you dare use that word. We can fix this, Hyun-chul tried, his strategic mind still calculating angles. We built this city together. The charges are true. Every single one. Zarya stepped forward, and all 3 flinched. You slapped me, thinking I was his weakness. You framed him, thinking I was too soft to fight back. Her smile was as cold as winter. You forgot something important. Jae-hoon stood, took her hand. She is not my weakness. She is my strength. My partner. My equal. And you underestimated both of us. A massive screen flickered to life behind them. Emails. Financial records. Videos of meetings. Payments. Murders. Every crime is documented and time-stamped. Their faces on the screen, plotting. Planning. Betraying. Min-woo snapped. He lunged at Jae-hoon with a roar of rage and desperation. Zarya intercepted him. 4 moves. Precise. Brutal. Efficient. She caught his arm, twisted, and used his momentum against him. His shoulder dislocated with an audible pop. He screamed, dropped to his knees. That's for the slap, she said calmly, releasing him. Jae-hoon looked down at the three men who'd once been brothers. Tae-suk was crying. Hyun-chul's calculating eyes finally showed fear. Min-woo cradled his ruined shoulder. Police are outside, Jae-hoon said quietly. You have two choices. Walk out and face justice with whatever dignity you have left. Or be carried out after I let my people express their disappointment. Tae-suk broke completely, sobbing. Hyun-chul tried to run. Loyal soldiers blocked every exit. Min-woo spat blood, managed to speak through his pain. You've become weak. You let a woman. Jae-hoon's fist broke his jaw before he finished the sentence. The sound echoed through the warehouse like a gunshot. Min-woo collapsed, unconscious. Finish that sentence in prison, Jae-hoon said to his broken form. Police entered on cue, tactical units surrounding the warehouse. 3 sets of handcuffs. 3 men who tried to bury a king and found themselves buried instead. As they were led away, Tae-suk weeping, Hyun-chul silent, Min-woo barely conscious, Jae-hoon spoke one final time. You slapped my wife. You stole my freedom. Now you lose everything. His arm wrapped around Zarya's waist. We're even. The warehouse doors closed behind the police. Silence settled like dust. Justice, finally, had been served. 3 months later, Seoul Central Court. The verdicts came down like thunder. Yoon Tae-suk, 25 years for conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and obstruction of justice. His charming smile had vanished somewhere between arrest and sentencing. He'd aged a decade in 3 months. Lee Hyun-chul, 30 years. The additional cartel charges, facilitating drug trafficking operations across 3 countries, had sealed his fate. His calculated mind had found no escape route from the evidence Zarya and the Tanaka family had assembled. Go Min-woo, life without possibility of parole. Judge Park's actual murderer. The knife wound he'd inflicted, the life he'd stolen, the frame he'd helped construct, all documented beyond reasonable doubt. 17 corrupt officials received sentences ranging from 5 to 15 years. The corruption network that had protected the 3 friends collapsed like a house of cards. Seoul's underground didn't disappear, it never would, but it reorganized under new leadership. Leadership that understood the old ways had led only to destruction. New beginnings. Jae-hoon's new company occupied a glass and steel building in Gangnam. Legitimate. Legal. Clean. The sign read, Kong Security Consulting, in English and Korean. Inside, former prisoners worked alongside former guards. Im Sang-woo managed operations, his intelligence background transforming into corporate strategy. Guard Choi, just Choi now, headed their protection division, training security personnel with the same dedication he'd shown protecting Jae-hoon in prison. Ghost ran cybersecurity, his hacking skills now employed defending rather than infiltrating. The Forgotten Ones had found purpose beyond survival. In Seoul's immigrant district, Zarya cut the ribbon on her community center. The building was modest but filled with light. Self-defense classes ran 3 evenings a week, taught by a woman who'd survived trafficking and underground rings. Legal aid services operated on the first floor, funded by Jae-hoon's legitimate businesses and generous donations from the Tanaka family. Women came speaking dozens of languages. They learned to fight. To understand their rights. To believe they deserved safety. Zarya stood in the doorway watching a young Nigerian girl, no older than she'd been when she arrived in Korea, execute a perfect defensive combination. The instructor praised her form. Full circle. From survivor to teacher. From victim to advocate. That evening, their home. The kitchen smelled of jollof rice and kimchi, a fusion that represented their marriage perfectly. Jae-hoon chopped vegetables while Zarya stirred the pot, their movements synchronized from years of partnership. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Marrying into this life? Everything that came after? She turned to face him, ladle in hand. I regret nothing. We survived because we trusted each other. Because we fought together. He set down the knife, crossed to her, touched her cheek with infinite gentleness. The same cheek Tae-suk had struck. The same gesture he'd made the day he walked out of prison. They tried to break us. She smiled, leaning into his touch. They made us unbreakable. The kiss was tender. Not passionate urgency but deep, abiding love. The kind built through shared trauma and mutual salvation. Through prison visits and investigations. Through danger and triumph. The kind that lasted. 6 months later, press conference ***. Former crime boss becomes advocate for prison reform ran the headline across every news channel. Jae-hoon sat before microphones, composed and articulate. I learned more about justice inside those walls than I did running an empire outside them. Real power isn't control. It's helping others find their own strength. It's building something that lasts beyond fear. In the audience, Zarya watched with pride evident in her smile. 1 year after the warehouse, Royal Seoul Charity Gala. Full circle again. The same ballroom where it had all begun. Zarya wore midnight blue tonight, elegant and regal. Jae-hoon's tailored suit was impeccable. They entered as legitimate philanthropists, donors to prison reform, immigrant services, anti-trafficking initiatives. Whispers followed them. They always would. But the whispers had changed from fear to respect. From scandal to admiration. They danced together under the same crystal chandeliers that had witnessed Tae-suk's slap. The orchestra played. Other couples orbited around them. A young businessman, new to Seoul, leaned toward an older woman. Who are they? The woman, a society matriarch who remembered everything, smiled knowingly. That's Kang Jae-hoon and his wife Zarya. He was once a king of the underworld, they say. But she? The woman's eyes followed Zarya's graceful movement. She's the queen who saved his kingdom. Around the ballroom's edges stood their people. Ghost in an uncomfortable suit, scanning for cyber threats out of habit. Im Sang-woo deep in conversation with legitimate business partners. Choi watched the room with professional awareness. Others who'd been forgotten but now thrived. The camera pulled back, capturing the scene like a painting. At its center, Zarya and Jae-hoon danced, their hands intertwined. Wedding bands caught the chandelier light, platinum symbols of promises kept through fire. In a world that had tried to bury them, they had chosen to rise together. They had faced betrayal, survived prison, orchestrated justice, and emerged not broken but transformed. Seoul had learned a lesson that would echo through its streets and boardrooms for generations: never mistake his wife for his weakness. She was the reason he survived. His strength. His partner. His equal. And together, they were unstoppable.